Ladies and gentlemen, this House meeting will come to order of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee. We've got some members that are going to be trickling in, but I'd like to go ahead and get started. We appreciate your patience with us, a little late start. On the agenda, we have House Bill 713 by Chair Lady Dempsey. Madam Chair, if you want to step up to the podium and present your bill at this time.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having this hearing today. I know there's a lot that everybody's juggling right now, so it's good to see those of you that are here today. And we do have, after I speak, there is one person, Judge Glock, I think, that is going to maybe join us before questions, because Judge has some expertise, and your Judge McLean may also as well. I think that they could add to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Maybe clarify a few things as well.
We want to be respectful of those judges' time. And,
that's right.
And make sure and have them before we have questions.
That's right. So, this morning, I'll tell you what, I started the day off in a great big old hurry, and I really needed to go study this bill a little bit more. And the chaplain of the day began, and I was so glad I didn't jump out of my seat, because this morning, Pastor Mike Davis specifically spoke to kind of what this message that I'm going to talk to y'all about is. He said that the world needs more kindness, more compassion, more goodness, and we are called to care for one another. Every day as I travel during this time to the Capitol from around the Centennial Park area, I see more and more tents and more people just in a sleeping bag on a curb, and more clutter around them. And I think about how unsafe and insecure they must feel. I can't imagine when it gets dark what that's really like, because most of the time I'm at least passing them with a little bit of light. I don't know if they've stayed up all night and are finding a place to sleep while the sun is out. It really has hit my heart, and I've seen it more and more. Over the weekend, I had to travel to a grandchild's soccer game, and I saw so many people on our interstate on the side of it in tents. It shouldn't happen. That shouldn't be how you exist. Homelessness is defined as adults, children, and youth, or individuals who lack a fixed and regular adequate nighttime residence. It's not always sleeping on the street. There are a lot of people who actually are homeless that are staying with relatives or have found shelter in certain places. The numbers are very, very high. But certainly the COVID-related recession has increased housing insecurity for many Georgians and for many people who come here and at least think Georgia is the home. The bill will encourage different funding models and different types of homelessness services than we currently have today. It will not close shelters or lead to other adverse impacts on existing programs. The vast majority of funding for homeless shelters and housing, about 90% of this, the state will continue. This affects funds going to the construction of new shelters or housing, and grants to existing shelters or programs will not be affected. It involves redirecting funds to some successful areas that have received little attention from the federal government. That means structured camping facilities, safe parking facilities, and community cabin-style homes. Some of these already exist in other states across our nation. The city of Oakland has particularly done a good job with it. These forms of shelter are more cost-efficient than many other styles and can lead to expansion of short-term shelter. The Department of Community Affairs will be encouraged to ally with nonprofits who can promise their clients have fewer days on the streets, in hospitals, or in jails. We'll reward them financially for the more success they have. It can incentivize that local cities either reduce street homelessness or enforce laws against public camping. If any city does not meet those requirements, the department can merely move those funds, a portion of the total, into communities that are showing more success in order to incentivize others to do the same. The bill will encourage more original models There is no doubt this is a little out of the box. It's creative. It's a different way than we've done it. But if you're driving on the streets of Georgia and the highways of Georgia, or you happen to go into the woods in almost any small or large city, you're going to find that there are people that have found that that is where they need to put their head down every night. It will encourage those models and expand options. It will also leave the large bulk of today existing homeless services in place. The bottom line is that the effective reduction in street homelessness will help communities be safe. It saves money and helps people without a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence that they call their home to have the opportunity to get the help they need to move out of homelessness toward meaningful, safe, productive days. It also helps increase affordable shelter access and effective services to encourage those people to those conditions. The latest version that you have in front of you has also met with agreement with the lawyer, the SAG that works with the Department of Justice settlement to make sure that we are not creating a conflict on the certainly very important existing parameters that Georgia is under still through the DOJ settlement. You know, when I think about this, I just basically think that we can do more. There are great programs in our state. The number of people that are homeless today is less than there was in the most recent survey a few years ago. Our numbers were even higher. But I would say that the places where they are settling are not as safe today as they were at that time. So to help communities be creative, find ways with either private, public, or government properties to establish safe camping, safe sleeping bag, safe parking if that's your car, with limitations that keep it all in a very, very appropriate way. Most people who will be seeking this are in that window that lasts about 6 months. It's not their permanent situation, but circumstances have led them to be in a place where they've lost their home, they don't have a home, they don't have another place to go. So they're in their car or they're on a corner. No doubt many are struggling with, but not all, struggling with mental health and with addiction problems, and the circumstances where they might call home could further complicate and impact that. But I want to make you keenly aware that we're not talking just about adults. There's a large population of children and youth in Georgia that also don't have that reliable nighttime place that they can call home. These facilities require bathrooms and showers. And some of the examples, at least one I think that we will hear from the chairman's community, has gone beyond that. There are ways to extend that, but it is not to replace permanent supportive housing. It's not to replace the HUD incentives that exist today throughout our nation. It is to address a real, impactful problem in a very timely way. I think that we have perhaps Judge Glock is going to be joining us. That is his name, really and truly, Judge Glock. And he is more of an expert on this. So,
okay. Judge Glock, are you with us now?
Yes, I am, if you can hear me.
Yes, sir. Let's get, you've got video also?
I should be up there. I can see myself. But,
thank you so much for being here with us today. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chairman Collins, and thank you also, Representative Dempsey, for taking on the obviously important and essential issue of homelessness in Georgia. As Representative Dempsey so eloquently stated, this is a serious problem that is facing our nation and the state of Georgia more particularly. In general, we have seen reductions in homelessness across the state. And sorry, I should back up for a second too, just to clarify and state who I am. My name is indeed Judge Glock. I am not a judge. I'm a senior policy analyst with Cicero Action, a nonpartisan nonprofit aimed at bringing entrepreneurial solutions to public problems. I'm based currently in Austin, Texas. And one of the issues that I focus on is in general problems of housing and homelessness. And as Representative Dempsey said, there has been significant reductions both nationally and in Georgia in homelessness. In Georgia, the number is down from about 20,000 individuals over a decade ago to about 10,000 individuals. But we have seen, unfortunately, significant increases in one type of homelessness, that is unsheltered homelessness. Unsheltered individuals nationally have been, the number has increased by about 20% in just the last 5 years. And in some cities like Atlanta and Georgia, we've seen 25% increase in unsheltered homelessness in a single year. That was in 2019, even before the coronavirus pandemic. We know anyone who walks the streets of Georgia today and anywhere else can clearly see that unsheltered homelessness is increasing dramatically. What this bill does is try to focus resources on the most needy and the most desperate individuals in the homeless community, and specifically tries to take aim at the problem of unsheltered homelessness. It tries to do this in a few different ways, one of which is reforming the state grants to homeless services. As Representative Dempsey said, the vast majority of funding for homeless services comes from the federal government and from housing and urban development. Georgia itself proper only spends about $3 million on homeless services, but up to $25 million in normal years is leveraged by that Georgia homelessness spending money from federal money coming down to the state and to local entities. At the same time, in times like the 2020 coronavirus pandemic and the March 2020 CARES Act and the more recent passed stimulus bill, there are tens of millions of more dollars going down to the state of Georgia to fund homelessness spending. Now, what this bill tries to do as far as the funding streams for homelessness is trying to do different models that aren't usually incentivized in typical HUD contracts and grants to local agencies. One of those is include pay for performance housing, which means not merely giving an individual a home, but encouraging the nonprofit through fiscal incentives to make sure that individual stays off the streets, stays out of jail, and stays out of hospitals. We've seen models of this in Denver and Colorado and the state of Massachusetts that have rewarded nonprofits by the amount of time they stayed housed. And we've seen preliminary results that show some success in this model. This bill would encourage similar models from the state of Georgia. As Representative Dempsey says, it also encourages new lower cost models for shelter. Some of those, such as safe parking facilities, structured camping facilities, and community cabins, all can show very low cost community per bed shelters, much lower cost than much of the congregate or large individual shelters we're seeing today. The most recent stimulus bill, in fact, includes tens of millions of more dollars for what they call non-congregate shelter. These sort of community cabins or individual small bed campus-like settings that can provide more individualized privacy at a lower cost for homeless individuals. It also allows the state and encourages the money to be spent on what is called structured camping facilities. This is important because there is always an alternative to street homelessness. Street homelessness is merely the worst of all potential options provided for people who don't have a current residence. The bill encourages local cities and local counties to not allow street homelessness. It needs to, part of it is we only will direct the bill, as Dempsey's explained, will only direct funding to those communities that can show either reductions in street homelessness or that will enforce current bans and structures against sleeping on the street, as the vast majority of cities already do. This is important because when cities stop enforcing normal public urban rules on camping and sleeping on the streets, you see unfortunate increases in street homelessness. The increase you've seen in Atlanta, Georgia, before the coronavirus pandemic of about 20% unsheltered homelessness is the result of a lack of enforcement of street camping rules. You saw a similar event in Austin, Texas, where my hometown here ended street camping rules, and at the same time saw a 50% increase in unsheltered homelessness. Even they saw a 20% decrease in sheltered homelessness. Allowing people to sleep on the street and taking them away from shelters, which before the coronavirus pandemic in Atlanta showed 600 empty shelter beds, is not a humane solution. But we do have to make sure the cities and states always provide an alternative. structured camping facilities are that alternative. If people need an absolutely de minimis amount of place to be and to keep their things and possessions and personal belongings, they should have that option. And this gives the state the ability to set up those structured camping facilities where people can bring their own tents and possessions in there, but also provide them with supervision and also provide them with police protection. So this bill both incentivizes the grants for that and gives the state the authority to do that. We were talking to local members here. The sheriff of Douglas County in Georgia said he recently set for a structured camping facility for under $10,000 per bed and has seen incredible success helping more homeless people get on their feet through that structured camping facility. So this bill importantly redirects a small but importantly leveraged part of Georgia's homelessness spending into more productive avenues. And it also does some other things that Representative Dempsey briefly mentioned, such as reforming the state inpatient and emergency commitment criteria, because over 75% of unsheltered homeless have a severe mental health disorder. It also encourages more things such as street outreach teams. Georgia, the city of Atlanta, Georgia itself has a similar sort of program for street outreach teams, a similar one that has shown success in cities like Houston and San Diego and elsewhere, that combines police enforcement with social services and mental health professionals to help homeless people move from the streets to a more safe and more structured environment. Along with the conditions on grants on where and when cities should be enforcing and including street camping rules, this combines both the carrot and the stick, the advantages of a better, superior model, along with more expanded shelter, and the benefits of more access to mental health treatment for those undergoing a dangerous mental health crisis. So once again, I want to thank the chairman and Representative Dempsey for their thoughtful attention to this bill. And I would also like to say, of course, I'd be open to any questions or any other further issues about the bill or about the general issue of homelessness in Georgia. So thank you again for your time.
We appreciate you being here with us this afternoon on Zoom, and thank you for those comments with regards to the bill. I want to see if Judge McLean, is he on with us? Judge McLean, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for being here with us on Zoom today, and thank you for what you're doing out there in Douglas County. When Chairman Dempsey approached me about this piece of legislation, you were the first person that I thought of, because I know you've been thinking outside the box and working very hard off the bench just as much as you work on the bench to make sure that our community out there is a better place. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on this piece of legislation, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sort of got into the process a little late, but I've had a chance to read the bill. And if I can do this correctly, I want to sort of share a quick PowerPoint with you to show you what House Bill 713 looks like in Douglas County 3 years before it was introduced into the General Assembly. We've been doing this for 3 years successfully, almost exactly what is in this bill. So can you see something that says, this is the first time I've ever done this. Can you see something that says Shania Haven, Douglas County?
We don't see anything right now.
Well, let's see.
Here it comes. There we go. That's it.
All right. So I can't see what you're seeing. That's why I had to ask you. So we've been doing this in Douglas County for 3 years. Why? Well, y'all need to do something before it does something to you. That's the bottom line. It's coming. We need to be prepared for it in the state of Georgia rather than just react to it after it happens. We don't want it to get out of hand like it's got out of hand in California and other places. So 3 years ago, we had homeless encampments all over Douglas County. It was a problem for people because they didn't like their property being filled up with trash. They didn't like their trees set on fire. They didn't like people trespassing. When they tried to market their property or sell their property, it's tough on them when it's got tents on it. People complain. People are getting arrested. It costs us $1,000 a month to house an inmate for the crime of being homeless. Homeless people on probation, moving from camp to camp. Probation and public safety officials can't keep up with where they are. They're hunting them all the time. What's the solution? Allow them to camp on public property at a structured location where services are being provided to the homeless and an effort's being made to get them out of homelessness. What you see there is a homeless gentleman who's very proud of that sign and those flowers that he helped make for this camp. And Shania it's a Hebrew word that means a new beginning. And that gentleman used to be homeless. Private individuals, our local homeless coalition, local churches provide everything. The government provides nothing except permission. The county commissioners of Douglas County, when I brought this problem to them and asked them, could we do this? This is better than what we're doing. They graciously said yes and allowed us to set up the camp on Douglas County property. So we provide restroom facilities at the expense of donations. We pick up the trash. That's a water tap in. Donors paid for the water to be tapped into a public water pipe. That is a solar power collector with a power inverter, so the homeless don't show up at business people's businesses to plug in their cell phones and cause difficulties for them and their customers. They can also make hot coffee. As you can see, this is a picture of the camp. Does it look clean to you? It's kept clean. All the trash is removed. Go anywhere where there's unstructured camping in the state of Georgia, you're going to see piles of trash and garbage everywhere you look. At this supervised structured campsite, there is no trash. It's picked up, it's put in garbage cans. It costs $3,600 minimum to open a emergency room record at Wellstar Douglas Hospital. That's the minimum cost when you walk in the door. Provide running water and sanitation to homeless people. Less of them get sick. So how do we run the camp? The people in that picture there are part of the Homeless Coalition. The camp is visited numerous times a week. We provide a resident list to the Sheriff's Department so they know who's there. They know if they're on probation or not. They can report to probation because probation knows where they're at. The law enforcement officials know where they're at. If you have to obey the rules, if you don't obey the rules, you are removed. And we have to have rules because if you don't have rules, then Camp Resident A is going to victimize Camp Resident B. So you have to have basic rules inside the camp. We connect the residents to case management and other services. We've transitioned a number of them out of homelessness by connecting them to services. And we're addressing the situation with a minimal allocation of resources. It's basically donor-based and donor-staffed. And what we get from the government is permission. That's a thumbnail sketch of what we're doing. We need to start this in the state of Georgia statewide before the problem gets out of hand. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, at this time, I'm going to ask if there are any questions for Judge McLean. And Judge McLean, thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to present this and for all the work that you've done there in Douglas County to make this program successful. We have a question from number 15.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Judge, for being with us. I just was taking notes, trying to learn all about this program. And can you just tell me one more time about the $3,600 to open a Wellstar? I think, what were you referring to there, please?
It may actually be more. actually more than that. But when an indigent person goes to the emergency room, which is what we provide, that's the health care we provide in America for indigent people without insurance, it show up at an emergency room. And then when just opening a file on you, however you're treated, however you're dealt with, it's very, very expensive. And we found that, that in Douglas County, if you provide basic sanitation for people, there are less emergency room visits. And the cost of emergency room visits, of course, is spread out and paid for by the taxpayer, by people that have health insurance and so forth. So from our standpoint, ma'am, let's say you're not a do-gooder, you're not a do-gooder, you're not a liberal, you're not a Christian, whatever. It's practical to not house these people in the jail, to not bring them to the ER. It's a practical solution to the problem, in my view.
Thank you very much. Number 16 there.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this to us. I got a couple of questions. You said that the law enforcement, who they are. Did they show you ID before they could come in?
Yes, sir. We require them to identify themselves to us, and then we run criminal histories on them, so we know who's on probation, if you're wanted or not, if somebody's got warrants out for you. No one is allowed to live in the camp that we don't know exactly who they are.
Okay, and then another question right quick. You said if they don't follow the rules, they are removed. Does the camp officials remove them, or does law enforcement remove them? Who's responsible for removing them from a camp if they don't follow the rules?
Great question. So far, we have never had a resident refuse to leave. And I think part of that is they all know me. I'm sort of been out here in Douglas County for a long time. They know who the judge is. They know what the judge's situation is with the camp. It's located next to the courthouse. They know they're on probation. There's a lot of law enforcement. Generally, they all cooperate. Now, we had one guy today that refused to leave, actually. And so a deputy is going to arrest him if he doesn't leave. It's county property, and they're not allowed to stay there without our permission.
So that was my other question. So the county provided the place for this camp to be made. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I went to the Board of Commissioners, and sir, I'm a volunteer.
Yes, sir.
I'm 100% a volunteer in this enterprise. But the problem presented itself, and I went to my commissioners and asked them to give us a shot at doing this, and they said yes.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Chairman Werkheiser, is that number 6? Okay, Representative Neal online. Are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to the judge and everyone for bringing the bill. I do have 2 or 3 questions. My first question is, if the citizen who goes to the facility, if they can't make it to the facility, can't afford to get there, what have you, based on, I guess, lines 234, 235, if they are anywhere in the jurisdiction of this facility and they're not on the state property and they're not camping out there, are they arrested because they are not using the camp facilities that are provided by the jurisdiction that you're in?
Let's hold off on that question there, because we're just asking specific questions to the judge at this time right now. He's just giving some testimony about the
Gotcha.
success of this summer program.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Judge McLean at this time?
Yes, sir. I do have one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So my follow-up would be, when it comes to the utilizing of the current location you have in Douglas County, are the citizens provided with an address to use there for like mail or business dealings or trying to get a job? Are they able to use that location and the subsequent address to do those things?
Thank you for that question. And we have thought of that. We've been doing it for years. What we do is one of the local churches that's one of the prime drivers of the ministry. It's the Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd in Douglasville on Chapel Hill Road. They utilize the church address as a mailing address for the residents, and then their mail is brought to them. We have a caseworker that uses a county van to transport them. Let's say you need driver's license or an ID. You got to go to Carroll County if you live in Douglas County. So you need transportation to get ID. You need help to get a birth certificate. So that mailing address is the church mailing address that we use for all the residents to do those kinds of things that I think you're probably thinking of.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Frazier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the Jerry still there?
He is.
Oh, okay. Representative Frazier from Augusta, Georgia. Thank you so much. I just have a couple of questions relating to now that I understand that these constituents will be referred from the court to these camps. And so what is the time limit? I heard 6 months. So once they go through this program and they do not pass the program, my understanding is that they will have to leave the camp. And if they leave the camp, they're still homeless. So I'm trying to understand, where do they go from there? And the reason I'm asking you this is because I work with Under the Bridge Ministry in Augusta, where we feed the homeless. So we know that they have nowhere else to go. So even when you refer them out of from the courts and they go through the program, and if you can't place them in a home, what is the time limit? And then where do they go from there?
I'm not sure that question addresses itself to me. There's no one in the camp here in Douglasville they're connected with the court because they're on probation. But it sounds like you're talking about a drug court type situation, which I do run a drug court, and there is a mandated program for drug court that people have to get through to complete it. But in terms of what we do at the camp, we don't kick people out unless they violate the rules and affect the safety and health of the other residents.
You're right. I might need to redirect this to the author. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We have number 15 there.
Yes, thank you, Judge. This is Becky Evans from DeKalb. One more question. So you were saying that the church is the address for mail and transportation. So is that also a voting address for these people? Can it be a voting address too, or?
Well, that's an interesting, I don't know a lot about voting in this context. I do know that in terms of the sex offender registry, for example, the status of being in a tent in the woods is not a physical address. For purposes of that law, I would suspect that they use the church as a voting address and for a mail address, not as a physical residing address. So address is something that kind of changes depending on what the purpose is. Probably they can use it as a voting address, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you. Judge, I had one more question for you, if you don't mind. Have you kept up with any statistics about how this program has been successful and how many folks have come through there and made it and improved their life after they come from this camp?
We need to, and that's an area where we're not doing a great job. We did recently get a small amount of money from the United Way for case management. And so we have a person who works on a part-time basis, and they're requiring us to keep some data. So in the last 12 months, we've transitioned 6 people out of homelessness and into housing.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Any further questions at this time for Judge McClain? Okay. You have one more question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, 6 people out of how many, roughly?
At a given time, there's the camp population fluctuates. It fluctuates from around 12 people to 24. And it's kind of a moving target.
And about how many of those people have been there the whole time? Like, are some people just kind of, that's where they live now? Or
nobody? I mean, you know, the best way to fix homelessness, the number one way to fix homelessness is to get that person to a friend or a family member that will take them in. Mm-hmm. And we've, you know, put people on the Greyhound bus and sent them out of state and sent them to other locations to be with family. Sometimes they've gotten a job. Sometimes we've gotten them funded on disability that enables them to manage rent. But we need to do a better job of keeping data. But here's the thing. People want data when they give you money. Nobody's giving us any money, okay? I mean, we're doing this on our own. So we have not, but we do need to keep data for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions for the judge before he has to go? And you're welcome to stick around here, Judge. We're just going to move on to a couple other things. Thank you so much again for being with us today. We appreciate it. Okay, let's go back to Chair Lady Dempsey. If you want to come forward, do you have any comments you would like to make to the committee before we open it up for questions and comments from committee members?
What we've just heard. You've seen what one community has decided to do to address the problem on their own. Many are. I mean, almost every place in our state is well aware that there are problems, and how do we help? This is no doubt, like I said, a big, different approach to looking at some ways through a grant incentive to help communities do it, to allow them to do it, to encourage what they are doing if it's going well. I would hope that, you know, Judge McLean's program only gets better and better, possibly with some help from something like this. But in places where they are wringing their hands, or the numbers of people continue to increase, that the population is not going down, the homeless population, that we need to come up with a different way. It is only going to grow. Right now, I believe that, you know, and Georgia is so unique, more unique than any other state because of our settlement right now. One of the main ways we are going to move out of that settlement is to have supportive housing for people. It is one of the biggest hangups. We were charged with, I think, I could be wrong, I've got some experts behind me, but I think it was 9,000 at the beginning, a standard that we needed to meet. We're still in need of about places for 7,500 people. The numbers will increase. We will be catching more and more effort. The number won't be 7,500. It'll be 9,000. It'll be 10,000. It'll continue to grow. This is getting ahead of it, like Judge McLean said, trying to find a way to help those who are willing, first of all, and who want to do better. And then finding some pathways for those who just do not know that there could be safer, better places to put their head down at night, to park their car, to care for their children, to find the pathway to a better future. So it's big, it's different. It's a conversation that we certainly need to get started and have everyone's ideas come forward with.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of questions here. Is this Representative Frazier?
17.
I'm sorry, number 6. So that's you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairwoman Dempsey, I just have just a couple of concerns. First of all, I appreciate the presentation, but listening at your opening statements when you were explaining the bill, this is a diversion of moving monies from where we already have from the homeless program. Well, first of all, I really don't agree with that because we don't even have enough funding now to deal with the problems that we have with homelessness. And I also heard you say that when you drive in, you see all of these homeless people are there in the morning, you often wonder, well, where were they where did they stay last night? In the woods or whatever. Well, actually, the judge said it. The problem, we can find the cure to the problem, is family. But in the situation, I have stopped and talked to homeless people. And homeless people can tell you the answer. We can't legislate because we just see a lot of people herded together. We have to find out what situation they're in. We throw mental health around, we throw family abuse around, all of that. But if you really want to know what the problem is, stop one day and just talk to a couple of them. And they'll tell you why, because most of the homeless people that I know are a lot younger than myself. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been in corporate America all the way down to working at Burger King. And they have just lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. And they're in that situation, you know, not for themselves. So my question to you is, can we find some new money for this and not divert the dollars? Because I understand the model, but I'm looking at the numbers. It's not going to help the masses. It's just going to help a few. And I think maybe we could find some money somewhere else for that program, but not divert the monies that we have, which is not enough, either from local or federal dollars, to help the homelessness. And just like you just said, it's going to increase. And it's increasing because of our economy, and it's increasing because of COVID, and it's increasing because lack of jobs. So maybe that wasn't a question.
Yeah, no, it is. That was a statement. Comment. But I think there is a question mark at the end of it, because, and I appreciate the work that you're already doing, that you spoke to in feeding people, particularly, I believe, if I understood you right. And I think every community across our state is trying to find their way, whether, you know, like where I live in Rome, where the hospital, the mental health hospital, a large facility closed. It changed the dynamics of everything. A lot of people were not put on the street. That population is not who is in Rome right now necessarily. Some may be, because I would say particularly the addiction or the public drunkenness or things like that at one time were put in a state hospital to help someone get a little bit better, and then they might be able to return. The people who I agree with you, there are many people right now there because they have lost their job. And I think there will be more in some of our larger cities as the issues occur with evictions or not being able to continue to fund rent for some people right now. It is a moving target. It changes all the time. I think people come to it for all kinds of unexpected reasons. As I have started looking at this deeper, I started looking around and thinking, where is a safe spot? Where would I go? Where would Katie Dempsey try to go find a place that night to put my head down and to try to make it till the next day? Because for many, they are on a next day kind of timeline. You don't know what is ahead. The goal is to increase the services, to find ways to broaden our spending into these pockets, to find ways to help with mental health services that are allowed under the settlement. That's our big stipulation, that we've got to do that. But to move individuals either into that job, into helping them get that application, having the mail, like was spoken. Each and every community can face this differently, and many already are. So this is going to be a way to build on some opportunities that are there, to have some opportunity to create for some of our smaller communities even that haven't thought of it. The face of homelessness is different everywhere you go, but it is not unique to any one population. I have found that out. And certainly the younger and the young families that are facing it, the number of children. I think y'all have a piece there on your desk that came from Voices today that really talks about how many children impacted every single day by this. So I can tell you that I don't think any of us right now have the answers, but I think that it is something that we need to figure out some pathways to success for any who can or any who don't know that there is another way.
Okay, thank you. And one of the points I wanted to hit on as well is when I first looked at this, and kind of a 30,000-foot view and started to hone in on it. While you can look at it as diverting funds away, I look at it as a way to maximize the funds that are being spent. And,
Right.
and with this program, it's showing success, and it has a pretty rapid success as well. If the infrastructure is there with the camping and you have the support network, seems to me that it's a real quick way to help somebody transition with minimal cost. So I think maximizing those dollars that we spend is very important. Also, I'd like to recognize Representative Jenkins at this time.
Yes, sir. I just want to thank you, Representative Dempsey, for bringing this legislation. Having been a police officer on the streets, sent out to take care of some of these problems that the judge spoke of with no resources available. You know, this is so important to create, you know, as you say, a solution that communities can tailor and adapt to their specific needs. One thing we haven't talked a lot about, which is one of the most important things in the legislation, is found in Section 2, which modifies the commitment criteria. This is also just so important to allow us to help so many more Georgians get the care they need, because quite often, you know, the disease fights the cure in these cases. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And to that, I would say, and I'm not an expert. Please know that. I'm in here with y'all trying to figure out how we find a pathway to help. But Georgia today is one of only 6 states that require harm to self or others as the only way to seek those services, to be 1013. You know, that's strong. And we also do not have a clear standard of significant psychiatric deterioration, which is, those are words that are used intermixed in a lot of states and a lot of places. I think it's time for us to look at that. I know from what I've read about the Mental Health Commission, they talked about some of these issues. It's a big step, but it's important to look at it this time, I think. So thank you.
Representative Evans, number 15 there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman, for bringing this bill. And I actually need a little bit of education about the settlement that you've been referring to. You said Georgia is unique, and I need you to bring me up to speed on this settlement, please.
Well, and I will tell you there are experts that could tell you more about it. I know a lot and read a lot about it. The Department of Justice settlement, I believe it was in 2010 or 11. 11, which is why our hospitals across the state have had to close. It impacts congregate living, it impacts developmental disabilities, which is also a huge contributor to homelessness, high functioning, but developmental disabilities. So because of that, we had to close hospitals. The population has to be reduced and continues to be reduced. So when you see some of the dollars that flow into that portion of our state budget and the way they're carried out, it is all kept in line to stay still in the settlement. Our numbers are huge. They were at that time, but we had more hospitals around the state that were larger, and especially for the developmentally disabled population.
Okay. Let's we've been at it an hour now, so let's move along to some other testimony from some folks that wanted to speak. Ms. Katherine Marksman, are you with us here today?
Yes, I am here.
All right. Well, it's your turn to be here with us in the Public Safety Committee. So please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katherine Marksman. I'm the CEO of Partners for Home. We're the lead agency for the Atlanta Homeless Continuum of Care. Just for a little bit of background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been practicing in the field of social work for the last 25 years. More specifically, I ran and led a homeless shelter called City of Refuge. After that, I went and ran a behavioral health program here in Atlanta at our locally federally qualified health center that is specifically serving individuals experiencing homelessness called Mercy Care. And then after that, I came here to Partners for Home to lead the homeless strategy for the city of Atlanta, and been in this role for just over the last 5 years. I'm also a licensed attorney by training, although I don't practice law.
We won't hold it against you.
Thank you, appreciate that. So I would like to say that I was incredibly alarmed when I saw this bill, as were many of my colleagues. To my knowledge, none of my COC counterparts, there are 8 of them around the state, have been consulted as it relates to any component of this bill. And I know that I definitely was not consulted at all. There's a couple of my colleagues who are also going to provide testimony. They were not consulted as well, as they are experts in the field in this space also. Representative Dempsey is correct. We are called to care for one another, and we know the greatest and most effective care that we can provide someone experiencing homelessness is evidence-based permanent housing solutions. That is, in fact, the only thing that ends a person's homelessness. And I would argue that, yes, we know that families and friends are a good alternative for people who are experiencing homelessness. However, many, if not most people who are experiencing homelessness do not have that network to rely on or go back to as a viable option. Many of them have been kicked out by their family. And what we know through qualitative data that we have conducted with a report that's available on our website right now is that network impoverishment is one of the driving factors that lead people into homelessness in our community, which means not just our people who are experiencing homelessness are poor, but everyone in their network is also living at the margin and simply do not have the means to take that individual into their homes to care for them and provide housing for them as well. What we know about our housing outcomes, and I don't know if I can share my screen, I do have a couple slides, and we have demonstrable outcomes that show the effectiveness of permanent housing in our community. 99% of the people that are placed in permanent supportive housing quarter after quarter in the Atlanta continuum of care either stay in permanent housing or exit to permanent destinations. Our returns to homelessness are very low. Our system performance measures are actually posted on our website. You can go and look at all of them currently, and you can see by project in detail how those projects perform on a regular basis. As it relates to sanctioned encampments, I would argue with Representative Dempsey in that this is not new or innovative. This is happening all over the country with little to no positive outcomes. Cities and communities that have created sanctioned encampments are paying exorbitant costs for public safety and for sanitation, costs that could otherwise be diverted to more dignified shelter like hoteling that has been incredibly effective across our community and now here locally as well. In addition, the lack of sanitation and the healthcare challenges that have occurred in encampments, including hepatitis outbreaks that we saw in San Diego a couple years ago, were incredibly alarming. The San Francisco encampment that is operating currently right now is more expensive than traditional shelter. Unfortunately, we don't have any outcomes to look to that the judge presented from the Douglasville approach. And with only 6 exits to permanent destinations in 1 year, I don't think we can argue that this is a effective or evidence-based solution that we should pursue. And what I would like to offer is we have been operating a non-congregate shelter hotel that Mr. Glock, who is not a judge, alluded to as an effective option for the last almost year. We stood it up in mid-April last year. We have 2, in fact. And I know there are others operating across the state. Through that operation, we have been able to close 8 encampments. Of the 8 encampments that we have closed, 256 individuals moved into the hotel and only 17 people refused that option. We cannot force people into shelter. And we cannot, even if we create sanctioned encampments, force people into a sanctioned encampment. The reason why people choose to sleep outside and refuse traditional shelter is because of the high barriers to access and the rules and restrictions that are in place. What Judge McLean described was a rule-laden, high barrier sanctioned encampment that requires identification and that requires all kinds of restrictions to entry. That is the exact opposite of what people who are unsheltered actually need, and really, truly at the core of this, what they want. Because again, if we're talking about forcing people into a sanctioned encampment, that is actually not allowable under law. That would be like a homeless internment camp. And I don't think for a second any of us are looking to go in that direction. So we have to think about, and two, I wonder, have we even asked people experiencing homelessness what they would want? Because what I would argue is if we did, they would say permanent housing. And permanent housing is an evidence-based solution. In addition, we've used federal stimulus dollars over the last year to scale permanent housing solutions. And so we've now created a proof point that where we invest at scale federal and local dollars into permanent housing solutions, we can create pathways out of homelessness, and we can do it very quickly. What we've done in the last 4 months is housed permanently and ended the homelessness of more people in the last 4 months through that infusion of dollars than we typically house in a year. And so what I would argue is that we really need to, if we're talking about being innovative and actually ending this problem instead of perpetuating it, we should be talking about how we as a state fund and create sustainable revenue streams for permanent housing solutions. And we also need to look at the unintended consequences of what sanctioned encampments have done and created around the country. Because as I said, what we have seen is they become very difficult to manage. They become more expensive than existing shelter to manage, and they also become very difficult to close. We have had an underutilization for the last year or more of emergency shelter and transitional housing. And the reason for that, we believe, is again, because the barriers to access those beds are frankly too high. And so if we create another high barrier shelter type option, that is not going to solve the problem that we are trying to solve. We need more low barrier options that are dignified. And what we know about the hotel is that many individuals who would have otherwise denied traditional shelter accepted a hotel because it was dignified, they had privacy, they had safety in the ability to close a door, they had their own bathroom, and they had the ability to see a line of sight to a permanent housing solution. And that's exactly what we should be focused on as a community and as a state. The other thing is redirecting these dollars are going to diminish our existing ability to do that. We don't currently have any sustainable revenue stream at the state level for homelessness at all. We have the State Housing Trust Fund that's been flat at $3 million through a general fund allocation for many, many, many years. That has to be scattered around like peanut butter across the entire state with very little impact.
Man, we've got to move on down the road here. If you'll try to wrap up.
Yes,
my attention span, I'm not an attorney, so my attention span is very short.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry if I haven't held your attention. And so if we have to divert those limited dollars to sanctioned encampments, then that's actually going to diminish our ability to continue doing the existing housing solutions that we're doing. And I'll close there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on down to Miss Sylvia. Is she on Zoom here with us?
That's great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead. If you could,
okay, great.
We're an hour into the meeting now, so if you could make your comments as concise as possible, brevity will be your friend.
Okay, I appreciate that. My name is Mariel Risner-Sibley. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Supportive Housing Association. I support, and I want to echo Ms. Marchman's comments here. I work in the field of supportive housing, and my colleagues and I were not consulted about this legislation. I have the utmost respect for Representative Dempsey, and she was able to come and join us at our conference in November. So I look forward to being in touch with her about concerns about this legislation. But I just want to put forward that this is being portrayed as a rewarding system, but it's not in actuality going to be a reward system. It's going to remove funds where we already have a shortage of funds. And Representative Dempsey mentioned that we have a growing amount of need. And what we really need to do is focus upon capacity building in Georgia. And we do have some circumstances that make it difficult to grow capacity in Georgia in terms of being able to pay for services. And what was referenced before as a settlement in Georgia, it's absolutely true that the sticking point has been the creation of supportive housing. And so what I would like to do is educate this committee about that settlement agreement. There's an interest in it, and I think you all need to hear what the holdup is with the creation of capacity. And I just want to say that diverting funds from existing supportive housing and using this system, which there is no data that supports it. And it sounds great what's happening in Douglas County, but there's been no investment, and it's not been done on a level of the scope that's seen in other areas, and particularly what Representative Dempsey is pointing to that she sees surrounding the Capitol. So I don't think we should be looking at these small, almost undeterminable outliers to create really big policy that affects everyone across the state. I think we really need to more intensely look at the data here and what other experts can provide. And I'm happy to provide that data and to be in touch. And so I hope that this was concise enough, and I look forward to more conversation and more discussion with each of you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments, being here with us today. Ms. Hayes is with us. Are you available on Zoom, Ms. Hayes? Can you hear me? Okay, how about Ms. Nadler? Miriam Nadler, are you with us?
Can you hear me okay?
Well, we sure can. Let me turn this
Fabulous. Thank you. Actually, this is Ellen Yeager. I am using my granddaughter's computer since that's the only one I have working at the moment. So that's Miriam Nadler. But I'm Ellen Yeager. I had called and asked if I could also address the committee. I'm a mental health advocate. I've worked in the field of mental health for several decades. I'm retired now, but still deeply interested in what's happening. And I really do understand the depth of the problem, and I want to address it only from the perspective of mental health. I realize people end up homeless for many reasons, but clearly mental health is one of them. And I have worked with Representative Dempsey for years, and I know that everything she has ever done for mental health has always been looking forward to bringing about the best outcomes. And so I can't say I support this bill, and I'm disappointed because I know she's looking for the best solution. But I too am concerned about some of the money that is going to come out of supported housing. And I know it's only a percentage, but considering there's not enough now, even a percentage can hurt. I'm also concerned about how you would enforce this. If you enforce it, it means it'll be a misdemeanor, and that involves the courts. And it's really my understanding that we're trying to move away from mental health and the courts being connected as strongly as they are. You know, the Governor's Commission on Mental Health has been meeting even through the pandemic. I give them a lot of credit for the work they've done. I think it's really important to hear what comes out of this commission. This is not coming from the commission, and I really think it's critical that we don't sort of jump the gun on a bill like this before we hear what the commission says about this. And they are looking at homelessness, and they are looking at the courts, and they're looking at every aspect of mental health. And finally, I would just like to say that people with a mental health challenge who face these challenges every day, it is services that provide them to function. It is services that allow them to live in recovery, which means they get jobs. And with jobs, they have their own apartments. They have the ability to live the kind of life we all really want to live. And those are the services that we're just, as a state, and as much as we try, we really are still on the bottom of the list in terms of the amount of dollars we allocate for community services, for peer support, and for a whole list of services that we know keep people in recovery. And again, I know that Representative Dempsey has really been an incredible champion to provide those services to Georgia, and we appreciate that greatly. But this bill, I'm afraid, just doesn't go where it is that I think Representative Dempsey would like it to go. And so I would ask that you really table this, keep talking about it, let the commission get involved, the Mental Health Commission, let the advocacy groups across the state hear more and have more opportunity for input, and then have another discussion about where to go. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Let's see, there's someone else. Let's get back around to Ms. Hayes. Are you with us, Ms. Hayes? One last time for Ms. Hayes. All right. Let's go back up. Kim Jones, are you on Zoom with us today? Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Chairman. No, sir, I was going to withhold my comment till the next meeting, but thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in the room that would wish to give any comments or testimony at this time? Okay. If not, the chair would defer back to the author, Chairwoman Dempsey, if you have any closing comments for us today.
I do. I'm also getting messages that Judge Glock might like to respond to this. I don't know if that's appropriate, and then I will just say a few words to close this out.
Let's defer to Judge Glock, who's not a judge.
Yes,
you are a judge in the sense your name is Judge, but you're not a judge. So go right ahead.
Yeah, sorry about the confusion of the name. And I'd just like to thank also Marksman, Sylvia, and Nadler for their testimony, which I very much appreciate. And in many ways, I think agree with. I think the areas of disagreement, which I think this bill will help address, is one, structured camping facilities are not always an everywhere solution. I think everyone would agree to that, but they certainly should be an option. And the important thing here is they're a superior alternative to what is existing in most places, which is camping on the streets. As often noted, there's about 3 individuals dying a day in the streets of LA in their camps, about 1,000 per year out of 60,000 people. The death rates in unstructured camping facilities, camping out in public, is absolutely atrocious and rivals that in any wartime situation in American history. So structured camping facilities may not be ideal, and they're merely one option among several provided in this bill, but they are certainly superior to the alternative of allowing people merely to live and die in the street. And as far as permanent supportive housing, I will not disagree that this is obviously a very important part of any attack against homelessness, and we would not want to disrupt all sort of public, or anyone who, this bill would not want to sort of disrupt permanent supportive housing solutions. But the important thing is, in and of itself, permanent supportive housing cannot be a permanent solution to all homelessness. As we mentioned, as Dempsey mentioned before, Representative Dempsey mentioned before, this is a small portion of total funding going to homelessness in the state. And most importantly, this bill does not prevent public permanent supportive housing from being part of a pay-for-performance solution. It specifically rewards those nonprofits that can keep people off the street and out of jail and out of hospitals. And we actually have seen solutions in Denver, and as I mentioned, in Massachusetts, where pay-for-performance contracts involving permanent supportive housing can be very successful and have shown success keeping people off the streets. So this sort of allows, this pay for performance provides a range of different options for people that may need housing. It doesn't have to be pure permanent supportive housing, but it can be. And if we've shown this sort of success that Marksman Ms. Marksman has said as you showed, which I very much believe, then that's great. They will be further rewarded under this bill to continue that success. And most importantly too, but merely providing permanent supportive housing on its own will not be enough. The last thing I'll say is we've seen this in San Francisco. San Francisco has built almost 7,500 units of permanent supportive housing, one for every 100 individuals in the city. And that was enough to house every single homeless person in the city when they started. And yet they've only seen the problem of homelessness grow. On its own, permanent supportive housing is an important part of the solution, but it can't be enough. And furthermore, this bill, which will furthermore reward those people and nonprofits and continuums of care that are doing well, is exactly what they need to continue moving more people off the street in the most effective and cost-effective way possible. Thank you very much again, Chairman Dempsey and Chairwoman Dempsey and Chairman Collins.
Thank you so much. Judge, it's always good to see you there. Thank you for being with us.
So thanks. So as I said, whoops, it is a great, big, different idea. We've heard from people who have worked in both ends of the spectrum involving this and trying to find ways to address the camping and just the living on the street that we're seeing right now, as well as those who are so focused on long-term permanent solutions. And those are no doubt the big goal. I'm certainly, neither is this trying to get in the way of helping people find long-term solutions. But in the meantime, I think it is really important for us to realize that there is plenty for all of us to do. Different places, different ways. We need to figure it out. This is an option. I'm so glad, I'm so thankful for the hearing today to begin this discussion. It is not meant to undermine any of the hard work that I know our COCs are doing. And I certainly do believe, most importantly, number one, in permanent long-term solutions for all who struggle. But I do believe that we have to not close our eyes and turn our head on the really visible reality that is happening across our state. I'm not asking you to go beyond here. Don't even think about the nation right now. Think about our state. Think about your hometown. Think about your neighboring communities and solutions. So it's time to not talk about what we cannot do, but what we need to find an answer to do our very best to do. I do want to address the fact that one reason that I brought this forward is it broke my heart that the Mental Health Commission did not talk about homelessness.
Absolutely.
It was not a part of the work that they did. So it became more and more important to me that at this point, now they're beginning their work. This was the first year. There are days and months and years ahead for them to work. But that was not a part of what is such a very highly visible, huge problem for communities across our state. So as leaders in this state who have been elected by your own community, I think it's very important that individually we come up with ideas, bright, creative, innovative ideas that might work where you each live. And I would love to hear more and more about them. So thank you so much for this time, for your patience to listen and to consider.
We appreciate everyone who has been here to give testimony and be online with us. Committee members that hung in here with us, thank you so very much. There being no further business before this committee, we stand adjourned.